Okay, let's have a tour around my loft layout, Norbridge. Starting off in the fiddle yard, we can sort of run along. This layout is a fiddle yard to terminus station layout. Basically eastern region. The fiddle yard's quite long, although we are fairly cramped for space. And now entering the scenic part of the layout, we have on the left the a branch line, and on the right the main line. Coming along, got various scenic features. Behind the windmill we have the farmhouse, which looks quite distant. I've actually modelled it in N gauge to give it a false perspective of distance. There are two cuttings here. The near side one is for the branch line, and the far one, which you can't actually see the tracks just yet, are for the main line. So coming round, Norbridge is very much an East Anglian flavour, so it's quite rural in places. We have various features like terraced houses and scrapyards and allotments. And coming up on the left now is the engine sheds, the motive power depot, and in the foreground the goods yard with a goods shed. Quite a busy looking scene at the moment. Engine sheds looking quite full up. It must be sort of fairly late at night. Most of the traffic has returned to the shed now. In the distance, in front of the retaining wall, is a very small local diesel depot. Obviously sort of Taxoner's last thought when diesels were introduced. This is mainly a transition period layout, although as you can see we do have some older locos, LNER pre-nationalisation stock, so the period is very wide. It's from 1935 up to 1965. So I tend to use this second part as the LNER engine shed. And then coming round we see the station throat. So Norbridge, which having an East Anglian flavour, although it's a freelance location, the name comes from an amalgam of Norwich and Cambridge, which would be the biggest stations in the area. This particular one has 8 platforms, the 6 main ones, all capable of taking 9 to 10 coach trains, with 2 bay platforms in the near side. So it's quite a busy town scene in the background. There are over 100 people loitering around on the platforms. It certainly doesn't look like it, I must admit, but they're so spaced out. The actual length of the platforms are actually 60 feet if you add them all together. So if you cut them up, put them all in a line, you could actually get a real coach on there. So coming up to the station now, it's actually a continental building, but it's actually got quite a Great Eastern flavour to it, I feel. And coming along, there's the High Street, Norbridge High Street. So quite a nice little scene. Most of the buildings actually predate this layout to my father's layout, so it's probably some of them getting on for 50 years old, but still working perfectly well. So in the foreground here we can see the second of the bay platforms. Very short, just for DMUs and rail cars. Now the original concept of the layout was fiddly yard to terminus station. I actually found that very frustrating. The run was so short that it didn't seem hardly worthwhile. I mean, constant run layouts, you know, sort of tail chasers, are really all about the journey, whereas terminus stations are very much all about the excitement of arrivals and departures. So, having found that fairly frustrating, I actually put couple of tracks in to bypass the station and carry on round. We have about 5 pubs on the layout, so probably obviously not enough yet, so perhaps we'll need some more. So coming on round, we've come back into a country area and we're approaching now the Norbridge cutting. As you can see, it's quite rural. So this section I built later on. It was over the water tank in my loft. And it's a nice little pond area with a water mill and a stream running out of it. Coming up to hillsides. And coming around here is the Norbridge cutting. The trees in the foreground are actually old Britain's trees, Britain's oak trees with more modern woodland scenics foliage on them. So to bring us now back into the fiddle yard, we have this quite impressive bridge coming along here. I couldn't make this a scenified section because it has to be removable, so we can retract the loft ladder. So here's another view of the fiddle yard. The reason I built this in Pico Code 100 track is because originally my last layout was in our spare bedroom, but because of demands of space that had to be abandoned and dismantled. At the same time I dismantled my father's layout when we sold the family home. So I had a mounted of already used Code 100. So it seemed the sensible thing to use that. I would much prefer to have gone fine scale, but had I had to make or buy all that track work, I would never have made such a complex layout. So anyway, turning around again, nice mechanised turntable there, runs very slowly, about 1 revolution per minute. We see the coaling stage there and the signal box, and again looking up at the station. So that's the layout. Perhaps we should see it now from a driver's eye view and take a cab ride in a Class 55 Deltic.